What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we are doing rating of wildcards for Game Week 7. So a lot of people have hit the button ahead of Game Week 8, when a lot more people are going to hit the button. So don't worry, we'll do more of these videos next week. But we're going to talk through some of the drafts, how they're looking, which players are kind of favourable, which players you should be thinking about bringing in, taking out, and all that usual stuff. So if you enjoy it, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and let's jump into it. Okay, so just before we jump into the drafts, I did write up some wildcard like picks and stuff that I would do if I was on a wild card, or that I would pick if I was on a wild card for my 888 Sport article. So I've linked that in the description below if you want to go and read that. But we're going to go through a few drafts. Now, there's quite a few similarities between all these drafts that I had, and I didn't want to just pick one just for the sake of it that's like completely crazy that no one's ever going to do. But there are some subtle differences between each one. So players like Salah and Lukaku are in everybody's drafts. Antonio is pretty much in every single one as well. And then a Chelsea defender like Rudiger. This one's a little bit different in that Diaz is on the bench. I don't think that's necessarily a bad call at all. That's one of the problems with the Game Week 7 wildcard is you've kind of got to get the Man City players this week, because you don't want to be spending transfers on them next week, but they do play Liverpool away. So you've played the more attacking one in Cancelo, that makes sense. And playing Ben White is not the end of the world. I do think it's quite close. You could possibly play Diaz, but yeah, playing Ben White is fine. And then you've got some fairly standard picks. So people have submitted these teams to me before some of the press conference news. So Rafinha has been passed fit, so his flag is now off. So Rafinha is a great pick. I would 100% have him. I do wonder about Sarr and Benrahma, if there's possibly a couple of better picks you can go with there. Like, I don't mind Sarr. I think for Leeds, Liverpool, okay, Liverpool's not great. Then it's Everton, Southampton. I think the next 4 run isn't too bad, although one of those games is the Everton one is away and the Southampton one's at home. So 2 home fixtures, one of which is Liverpool, and the other 2 are away. So the fixtures are okay, and I think for his price, nailed on talisman, etc., 90 minutes, not a problem. The thing with Benrahma is he and Antonio, obviously, if they've got a tricky fixture, they're both going to get it at the same time. So you've got Brentford at home, okay, brilliant fixture. Everton away, which is okay, then Spurs at home, then Aston Villa away, then Liverpool at home. It just doesn't feel like that good of a run of fixtures to have both Benrahma and Antonio. Now, Antonio is really difficult to get rid of, and I think you can make a case to do it around Game Week 11, but we also have to take into account the price rises that we've had. Maybe that's the case with you and Benrahma. Maybe you don't want to lose that money, but I always think unless you're going to want the player back very quickly, you haven't lost that money. You've just actually gained some value in your team, and now you've cashed it in for someone else. So somebody like Saka might be a slightly better pick for me, because I just think Arsenal's fixtures are just a little bit better. And I don't think Benrahma's a bad pick, and the fact that he's been rested a couple of times is good news. But from the 6-ish million mids, I think once you got Rafinha, okay, Sarr's okay, then someone like Saka might be decent. Obviously, with the way you've got this team, Diaz will play most weeks and White will be on the bench. So he can cover maybe some of those tougher fixtures. I'm not the biggest fan of Saint-Maximin as an option. I know he's doing really well, and part of the way I play the game, sometimes I'm a bit slow to catch up on these good options, but I just don't think his goal threat's that high, and I don't think Wolves away, Spurs at home, and Chelsea at home in the next 4 is that good. Now, the fixtures are probably slightly better than the short-term fixtures for Brentford, but long-term, I think Tony over Saint-Maximin is a better pick, and given that you've got a squad that you can rotate around a little bit, I personally would rather have Tony than Saint-Maximin. So Wolves away is okay. It's nothing special. And then this week I think it's West Ham, isn't it, for Tony? Yeah, West Ham away. Okay, Chelsea at home is fairly difficult, and maybe you could bench him for that week. But after that, Leicester, Burnley, Norwich, Newcastle, Everton, then Spurs away, then Leeds, Watford. Like, it's a really good fixture run for Brentford. He's absolutely nailed on. He's on penalties as well. He's going to play 90 minutes pretty much every game. I would definitely have him in ahead of Saint-Maximin. I know everyone loves Saint-Maximin, but I'm just saying my piece. Last thing, I don't think this team's got any money in the bank. Benjamin Mendy in goal. I just feel like he's too expensive, right? Every season, sometimes you get tunnel vision and you try and play the previous season. But in 10 years of playing FPL, virtually never has a £6 million keeper been a good option, because you don't get that many save points, that many bonus usually. To be fair to him, right, he's had 1 bonus point in Game Week 2, and in Game Week 4 he had another bonus point as well, and did make quite a few saves. But generally I feel like he's pretty much going to be a 2 or a 6 pointer, which is fine if he ticks over enough. But you're just never going to want to use a transfer on that position. This is one thing I feel really strongly about. I know, like I said, sometimes we play the previous season, but with Mendy, a £6 million keeper, like, you can get Alonso or Chilwell, I know that's a bit of a risk, but you could get Azpilicueta for the same price. So basically, with your team, instead of White and Mendy, you could have Ramsdale and Azpilicueta, and then at some point when you don't want the double Chelsea defence anymore, you just swap them to a different defender, but it's okay to keep the goalkeeper the same. I just don't think you're going to want Mendy long term, and I don't think it's a good strategy to make transfers on that. That's just my opinion. You don't have to take it. That's just how I feel about those goalkeepers. Dyer on the bench is okay. It's probably better 4 point. It depends how much money you got to spend, but again, you could just keep White, for example, maybe change Mendy and Dyer to like a Ramsdale or a Sanchez, and again, still get that Azpilicueta and just keep Ben White on the bench for another week. So I don't like Mendy. That's just my personal opinion. I think St. Maximin to Tony is probably slightly better, and Benrahma is an okay pick for this week, but I think long term Saka might be better. Okay, so this team has got an interesting talking point, and that is Raul Jimenez up front. So I tweeted about him earlier today, about how I'm finding it really difficult to go without him. Like, I'm obviously not going to transfer him out before Newcastle, but if I was to wildcard this week or next week, I think going Tony for the money saving is probably where my mind would go. But I just really like his fixtures. Like, Newcastle at home is so good this week. I think he's one of the best forward options this week. Obviously, he's now got his goal, so I'm sure that's going to be a boost of confidence, which I don't think you can necessarily measure. You don't know how it's going to affect players, but I think given the year that's happened to him, or the stuff that's happened over the last year, that probably is a big relief for him. And then you've got Villa away, Leeds away, Everton at home, Palace away. So there's maybe a few too many away fixtures in there, but playing Newcastle and Leeds in 2 of the next 3 is pretty nice. And then you keep going on the run. West Ham at home, Norwich away, Burnley at home. Like, we all know how good the Wolves fixture run is right up until game week 14. You could just keep him that whole time. He's nailed on. He plays 90 minutes every single game, and he's got penalties, and he's only 7.5 million. There's not too much to dislike. And then later on, maybe when Calvert-Lewin's back fit, when Bamford's got good fixtures, you've got a nice player that you can just move to someone else. Same with Antonio. I think over the kind of the next 7 to 8 fixtures, I actually think Jimenez might be slightly better than Antonio. But given that Antonio's got Brentford, Everton, Villa in the next 4, I think it's difficult to get rid of him just because we know how good he can be. He's obviously highly owned, and we've got a lot of money tied up in him. So I don't think this is a bad forward line, and it doesn't really hurt the rest of your team. Like, I was talking about Saka for the first draft, but Mbeumo is perfectly fine, like playing up front for Brentford. Like, this is probably the closest. This is probably why I like it, right? This is probably the closest to the draft that I would go for right now. Obviously, you've got 4 defenders from Chelsea and Man City, which is fine, and you've pretty much got all the safe picks as well. Cancelo, maybe long term, is a minutes risk, but right now he's playing week in, week out. We know Diaz is nailed, and Azpilicueta and Rudiger are probably the most nailed defenders from Chelsea as well. So it's looking pretty solid, and I think those 4 picks mean you don't have to worry week to week about the team sheets. And then if something else does go wrong in your attack, that's probably a better way to have your transfers focused right around that. And I like Jack Grealish. Again, one of the problems with wildcarding this week is you have to get him for Liverpool away, which isn't ideal, but from next week the fixtures are good, and he has played every single game so far. He started in every single game. So I think if you're going for a Man City attacker, I think it has to be him right now. I don't know if he can replicate some of the good returns he had from last year, but he's in the right team to do it, and his underlying numbers are looking just as good as last year. So I've got a lot of confidence in him, and I will be looking at him from next week as well. So there's not really too much to fault about it. One thing to consider is Trent Alexander-Arnold. For anyone on wildcard this week, ask yourself, how will you feel in game week 8 if he starts and you haven't got him? Will you be panicking? I mean, Chelsea are going to play Brentford away, and Man City are going to play Burnley at home in game week 8. So personally, I don't think it's as big as an issue as it feels like it probably is. But obviously, long term, you might want him back. So be realistic about how you're going to get the money to upgrade one of those defenders. Is it going to be Jimenez? Is it going to be Antonio? And when you want Trent back, are you going to be prepared to sell either of them? If not, how are you going to fund it? Because you're not going to want to sell Lukaku or Salah. It could be Grealish, down to a Saka, down to a Benrahma, down to a Sarr, whoever is the good pick at the time you get Trent back. But it's just something to have in the back of your mind. I think Ramsdale's a perfectly fine pick. I still think Sanchez is fine as well, by the way. But like I said earlier on the week, I think if I was wildcard, I'd probably go Ramsdale. So yeah, nice and solid team. Probably the closest to what I would do. Okay, so when this team was sent to me, it said that it had enough money in the bank to go back to Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm going to assume it's for one of the Chelsea defenders. So probably Azpilicueta back to Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm not really sure what I think about that. I think it's probably a good strategy. If you're someone that doesn't want to go without Trent for very long, then that's fair enough. Like, I'm just looking at the fixtures now again, like, obviously, if he's back for Watford, then straight away you'll be very glad that you've got the money. But if Chelsea are playing Brentford away, followed by Norwich at home, and Trent's got Watford away, and obviously Klopp's not going to tell you if he's definitely starting. He might tell you if he's available, and then Man United away, do you really want to use a transfer on that? I'm not sure you do. And then it's Brighton at home, West Ham away, Arsenal at home. I almost feel like you could just... If you're going to wildcard now, you could just go without Trent till game week 13. But to be honest, if I wildcard next week and Trent's available, I'll have him in my team. So I don't want to completely put people off getting him. I just think if he is back, Watford away, Man United away, is it even that good compared to Chelsea, who have got Brentford away and Norwich at home? Probably not, and you've got to use a transfer straight away. So I feel like most people, even if they put money in the bank, will probably talk themselves out of making that transfer next week, unless they get like team news, and Liverpool are playing in the first game, I think, on game week 8. I'll just double check that, but I think they are. Yeah, they are. So you might get early team news and know that he's starting, and that makes it a little bit different, I guess. So I don't think it's a bad strategy. I mean, to be honest, most of the players in the team we've already talked about, the only upgrade that you could possibly do by spending that Trent money is either Semedo up to Diaz, which would be nice, or St. Maximin up to someone like Jimenez, right? But if you only want to spend that amount of money on St. Maximin anyway, then going for Tony is actually a little bit cheaper, right? So with the money saved, you're either saving it for Trent or you're spending it on Diaz. There's probably not a huge amount in that, especially if Trent is back so soon, because Semedo's got a good fixture this week anyway, better than Man City have against Liverpool. And then you've got the money to go straight back to Trent, and a lot of people want to do that. So I actually think it's a pretty nice strategy, and I think I would have St. Maximin out for Tony, but that's just personal preference. And I think the rest of the team looks good. So I think this shows that you can keep enough money in the bank for Trent if you want to. And I think if I was spending around £5 million on a defender, it probably would be Semedo or Tierney, but I appreciate that people that have got Ramsdale probably don't want to double up with Tierney. Let's wait and see what's in the press conference about Semedo. He did seem to have a bit of an issue at the end of the last game, but it seemed to be more like cramp. He did get early sub though. Not scaremongering or anyone. I'm sure he's fine. But wait and see what's said in the press conference. I was just having a discussion on Twitter, actually, because obviously I talked about Chelsea defenders earlier, but we didn't talk about Man City ones. Because most people are going double Chelsea, double Man City, they kind of pick themselves, right? Cancelo and Diaz from City. And then if you don't want to take the risk of Chilwell or Alonso or Reece James, then it's pretty much Rudiger and Azpilicueta. But FPL Sui on Twitter made a good point to me that if you're only having 3 defenders, so in this case Cancelo, Rudiger, and Azpilicueta, you could go for Diaz over Azpilicueta and just have 1 Chelsea defender, 2 Man City. Now I do think it's quite close because the Man City defence is slightly better. And Diaz and Azpilicueta, they're not really too much difference in terms of attacking threat. Although maybe if Azpilicueta gets some games at right wing back, he might be a little bit better. But he's never going to be as good as whoever's on the left, that Chilwell and Alonso. I just think the reason that I would target Chelsea and Azpilicueta instead of Diaz, if you're only going for 1, is you get a better fixture this week straight away. And also I think, although the Man City defence is slightly better, the Chelsea team have better fixtures. Like, it's not to say that Man City won't keep the same number of clean sheets, but Southampton, Brentford, Norwich, Newcastle, Burnley, Leicester, like, it is such a good fixture run for Chelsea. Whereas Man City's fixture run is decent, but after Burnley, they got Brighton away, Crystal Palace away, Man United away, Everton at home, West Ham at home, so you've got possibly Calvert-Lewin back, Antonio there as well. I'm not trying to sit here and say that Man City can't keep clean sheets in those games, but I just think if you're starting from game week 7, which obviously all these wildcards are, I'd probably just go for the second Chelsea defender for now, but maybe swap that to a Man City defender later on. But as always, I've got no problem with Diaz whatsoever. Like, you can literally put him in your team now and just keep him until the next wildcard. Like, he's that good in that Man City defence, and he just plays every minute anyway. So it's a pretty tight call. I think over the short to medium term, I'd probably just go for the second Chelsea defender. But long term, you could go Diaz instead. So all the teams have been quite similar. There is a very big template that is forming around the wildcard this week. And to be honest, I don't think those people that wildcard in game week 8 will be much different in terms of the teams that they select. The main difference is they've probably just got a team they're happier with for game week 7. So the big difference with this one, and we've kind of gone through all the different scenarios with Trent on wildcard. So a few people just ignoring him, just spending all the money. The last one was, I've got enough money to get him back. And this one is, I'm just going to put him straight into the team, right? So obviously, if he's back for Watford, I don't really think you lose out at all, because all you're really missing is the second Man City defender. And like I keep saying, they're playing Liverpool away this week anyway. So you're probably not going to lose a huge amount of points. And if you do, I think you consider yourself a bit unlucky. And then you've got Trent straight away for Watford. I guess the issue is, what if he's not available for Watford and then it's Man United away? You're going to be a bit annoyed that you got that much money on the bench, especially when Man City have got some nice fixtures coming up as well. So I'm not quite sure about that. I like that Tony's in there. Same thoughts on kind of Sarr and Benrahma. They're okay for now, but I would be trying to think a little bit more about the medium to longer term fixtures. I do think Arsenal's are slightly better. I know for a lot of people it's going to seem like a knee-jerk after what happened against Spurs, but I think Saka's pretty much nailed on to play most games anyway, and I like his underlying numbers. And Benrahma's fine. I just don't know if I'd want the double up with Antonio anymore. I feel like it served us really well, and now might be the time to jump off. But if I'm wrong about that, that's a lot of money lost, and well, not lost, but it's a lot of money to get him back. So consider that. And I just, personally, the Chelsea defence is really annoying because if I was wildcarding right now, I'd go Azpilicueta and Rudiger for safety. But in Game Week 8, that could completely change because if Alonso doesn't play against Southampton, then I'm going to think that Chilwell's got a good chance of starting. And if Reece James is back, I might even look at him and just go Reece James and Rudiger and save a bit of money. I think by going in Game Week 7, you haven't... It's not like you've screwed yourself over because a lot of people needed to wildcard this week, but it's a really tough decision around Chelsea, and I just don't think I would have Alonso. Now, I am quite risk adverse. There's a lot of other managers out there that create content that would just stick with Alonso because he's so attacking, but I just think, as well as he's played, there's no way Chilwell just stays out of the team. I said that in the video earlier, and I think there is a high chance that Chilwell plays against Southampton. I mean, people keep asking me, I don't know for sure, I'm just guessing. But I just think possibly he could play against Southampton. And then going forward, like from Game Week 8 onwards, there is just a risk to both of them to the point where Reece James might be the better option. But if you're wildcarding this week and you've got Trent in the team, you just can't take a risk on someone like Reece James. So I think you've got to go either for Azpilicueta or you go for the second Man City defender instead and have Cancelo. But obviously, again, for this week, it kind of weakens it. These are the problems with the Game Week 7 wildcard. You just got to kind of lump it. You got to think a bit more longer term and just know that this week you might have weakened your team a little bit just because of that. The team will still perform fine, I'm sure. Smith are on the bench. I just don't know about it, to be honest. I just don't know if he's going to get enough minutes. And if he starts getting benched, you're going to be annoyed about having to play him. Like, you're always going to worry that if you play him, when you keep getting benched. I think for 5.3, I think he's 5.3 million, isn't he? It's probably not a bad pick. He's going to get more points than any of the 4.5 million pound midfielders. Yeah, he's only 5.3 million. He has started like 5 out of 6. So I don't think he's a bad option. Do you know? I'm not gonna say too much more about him. So I think it's a perfectly fine team. Livramento, obviously the best, cheap defender to have on the bench. I would just reconsider Alonso and just Trent. I just do wonder if you can do something a little bit more exciting for the next few weeks and just hope that he doesn't play against Watford. So there we go. That's the 4 teams we're going to look at. Just some further thoughts. Like, a lot of the teams are very similar. There's only really a few spots I think people are thinking differently, and this happens in FPL, that sometimes you get to a kind of point where a lot of people wildcard and there is just a template, and there's a good template for a reason, right? The Man City and Chelsea fixtures are about to get really good. Trent's injured at just the wrong or right time, depending on how you look at it. Everyone wants Lukaku instead of Ronaldo now. Antonio is really hard to sell. Then you're just looking at kind of Tony, Saint-Maximin or Jimenez as the third spot. Then you've got a decision to make around whether you want Grealish, and if you do, brilliant. If you don't, you just get a cheaper midfielder in. Saka, Rafinha, Benrahma, Sarr, they're all there. There's not really too many other midfielders around that kind of spot that you'd probably want in. Like, I'm looking at £7 million midfielders. Like Torres, possibly, if he could, get a run of games, but we're never going to know that. And Mbeumo, definitely I would look at. And outside that, you're just looking at players like Barnes and Zaha and Trossard, and so there is a template, and you can see that by the teams that were submitted. Like, if I went through a lot more teams, they'd all be around the same. It's just those key points. Like I said, you could go Diaz and Cancelo over 2 Chelsea defenders, but I think if I'm going this week, I just want to get that extra good fixture out of the way and probably go for 2 Chelsea. But like I said, Game Week 8 wildcards will be very similar, but there's going to be some subtle differences, especially around the likes of kind of Jimenez, because he'll have played his Newcastle game. Chelsea, we might be able to select Reece James, for example. Maybe Alonso gets injured while he's on international break and everybody goes for Chilwell. It's just going to be those small differences. That's the only difference between 8 and 7. I just think that some of those fixtures from 8 are just not as good, or some of the players in Game Week 8 that are good don't have very good fixtures this week. We'll see how it goes. Let me know what you think of all those teams. Are you going massively different? Let us know in the comments below. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here, and I'll see you again tomorrow.